Hello, everyone. Welcome to Roadmap 54, the podcast that talk about Africa and what African people they are doing across the continent. Today episode, we are going to visit the southern part of Africa, and we will be visiting Zimbabwe. We have a few curiosity about Zimbabwe. Let us see. Zimbabwe is located in the southern Africa, bordering Zambia to the north, Mozambique to the east, South Africa to the south, and Botswana to the east. It is a landlocked country situated between the Zambezi and the Limpopo rivers. Zimbabwe has three official languages: English, Shona, and Ndembele. I don't know if it is true, but I will ask our guest. Zimbabwe's literacy rate is at 92%, the highest in Africa. Zimbabwe holds the second place in the world hyperinflation record books with a daily inflation rate of 98%. Lake Kariba, constructed on the Zambezi River, is one of the world's largest man-made lakes in the world. And to finish, I found out that Zimbabwe comes from the Shona phrase, Nzimba Nzamambe. I don't know if I say it right. I will ask our guest to help me with this, which means great house of stone. Wow. These are few curiosity about this amazing country known as Zimbabwe. And today I have the pleasure be with me for this episode, one from this amazing country. I want to present you guys Zola. Hello Zola, how are you?
Hi, Elisa. ¿Cómo vai?
Oh, you get me in Portuguese. Wow. I was not expect this. Estou bem, estou bem. I
Bem,
was really
bem.
not expecting. Oh God, your Portuguese coming very well, by the way.
Thank you. Thank you. I've been practicing. I need to do a lot more practicing, but I've been practicing. I want to get serious with Portuguese.
Oh, great. This is
Yeah, yeah,
amazing. This is very
yeah.
good. Tell me, how are you? And after you tell me how are you, few of this curiosity that I said, they are like right. I went to Google, I searched a little bit to see few things about Zimbabwe that I didn't know.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Then what do you think? You guys have like three official language? Like English, I know Zimbabwe speak English. Shona, I know, yes. Ndembele, I think it is, but they are like the official language or no?
Right. So we have 16 official languages in
Wow.
terms of our constitution.
Okay.
So we've got many different groups in Zimbabwe, and those 16 official languages are recognized as languages that people within Zimbabwe speak. English
Okay.
is a language that it's one of the dominant languages because we were colonized by the British Empire. So when they colonized this area, what they did was that they mandated that English be spoken. So similar to the Portuguese in Angola. In Zimbabwe, it
Okay.
was the British. And so that's how English became a very widely spoken language. In terms of Shishona and Isindebele, the largest number of people speak Shishona. So that's why even if you meet a Zimbabwean, you probably have met someone who speaks Shishona. And then Isindebele is probably the second largest group, and that's a language that I speak. I speak Shishona and Isindebele, but I'm actually from one of the minority groups. I'm Kalanga, which is another language in Zimbabwe. So yeah, we've got, I think, if it's not maybe not the highest in the world, but one of the highest numbers of official languages.
Wow. I didn't know about this. This sounds very interesting. And like, okay, if today I go to Zimbabwe, will be like easy for me to communicate only with English, right? Before I know like Shona or Ndebele.
Yes. So in most places that you go to, you will find people who can speak English. That's true.
Oh, cool, cool. And teach me one word in Shona or Ndebele, how I can say like good morning or hi to people.
Okay, so in Shona, it's interesting because we don't say good morning. We say how did you sleep? So you
Oh,
can say it's very easy, Eliza. Very, very easy. You'll get this in no time. It's mamuka say.
Mamuka say.
Mamuka say, there you go. And
Oh,
then
I
in
like.
Ndebele, mamuka say. And
Yeah.
then in Ndebele, in isiNdebele, it's similar. We say livuke njani.
Oh, yeah. This is a little bit difficult. Wait,
Okay.
come again. Let me see if I can.
All right. So it's livuke njani.
Livuge Jani. Livuge
Yes.
Jani.
Well
Oh,
done. Well done.
now I can go to Zimbabwe.
Excellent. Yeah, you're welcome. You can come now. But you'll
Great.
only be saying good morning to people.
Yes. They will be the only word that I know.
Right. Right.
Oh, wow. I think, and about the names of Zimbabwe, I went to Google and say that Zimbabwe comes, the name Zimbabwe comes from Shona, and I don't know if I say it right. Nzimba Nzamambwe. I don't know if I need to say it like this, which means great houses of stone.
Right. Right. Yeah. So um that's correct. So Zimbabwe is where that name comes from. And it dates back. I'm not sure if you've ever heard of Great Zimbabwe before. Have you heard about that history?
No.
Okay. So in what we call Masvingo province, there was a kingdom called the Mutapa Kingdom, right?
Okay.
And it's a kingdom that existed from around the 15th century to the 17th century, and it was one of the most powerful kingdoms in Africa. And there, if you go there, I'll actually send you a link, and you can maybe share it in the show notes. But
Oh, yes, please.
there's an incredible site where you see people who built stone buildings without any mortar. You know, when we build buildings now, we need to put the cement between the bricks, right? But these
Yes.
guys had a technique of putting rocks together where they didn't need any mortar at all, and those buildings are still standing today. So that's the story of the Mutapa Kingdom, and part of our one of our national symbols is Great Zimbabwe, those Zimbabwe, which is a very big thing in terms of our identity and our heritage as a country. And I'll share the link with you. You should check it out. It's amazing actually to think about that the fact that Africans were innovating in construction even as early as the mid 15th century. And another interesting story is that when people from Europe came and saw those, they assumed that it was Europeans who built these houses because they didn't believe that Africans could construct such incredible buildings. But it's true that it was Africans who built them, and it's one of those really cool things to read about and to learn about.
Wow, I think this is very interesting, and this remember the pyramid that we have in Egypt. Like people, they don't talk about this construction that happened in Zimbabwe. We all know, like the world know about the pyramid that we have in Egypt, but this kind of
Mhm.
construction we really don't know. I didn't know like until today. I'm in shock. I really didn't know, and it's very interesting. And this make me think like, why, like, where is this knowledge right now?
Uh-huh.
I don't know if you get me, in the sense
Uh-huh.
of they build it,
Mhm.
they maintain it, but because the
Uh-huh.
colonization and all the stuff, we adapt a new way of building, and maybe that knowledge
Uh-huh.
was like lost with the time. And you, hmm,
Yes. Yeah, that is such a great question, Elisa. That's it. Yeah. And I think you raised something important about how there were technologies that we had developed. Because what I'm talking about when we talk about constructing in a certain way, it's a technique, right? And
yes,
perhaps there was some way that they may have hardened the rocks in a certain way to preserve them, and that's technology, but it was lost. And I think one of the legacies that's important to talk about with colonialism is the loss of the culture and how things were passed down. We lost that way of passing down because ways of life were disrupted so much, you know. So if people would pass down through something like oral history, if you are having your home taken away, if you're being kicked off your land, if you're having all these terrible atrocities happening to you, so much is lost along the way, and it's a tragic thing, but it's exactly the question you're asking, like where is this knowledge, where's all this skill and knowledge that we used to have, what happened to it?
yes, they're lost with the time. They,
Uh-huh.
unfortunately,
Uh-huh.
a lot
Uh-huh.
of to have led in this continent. I think we still have a lot of things to talk. And Zola, I want to know more about you. Who is Zola? What she like to do? Like, tell me more about yourself, and tell me more about life in Zimbabwe. Like, in your point of view. I don't want to know about the media, but I want to know about you as someone that born and was raised in Zimbabwe. Like, how do you feel living in a country like Zimbabwe?
Uh-huh. Yeah, thanks, Eliza. I love talking about Zimbabwe. I've lived here all of my life. I was born here about 10 years after Zimbabwe gained independence, and I feel very privileged to have been born in this country because it's a very beautiful country. I know you've never visited, but when you come, you'll see. We live in a country it's got great weather. Even with climate change, we still have really great weather. And it's just a place where people are very friendly and people
Yeah,
are, when you walk around, it's very different to overseas where, you walk around and no one will say anything to you. In Zimbabwe, like if you land in Zimbabwe today, Elisa, and then you say, I'm looking for the city hall if you're in Bulawayo, someone
yeah,
will help you. And they won't even just give you directions. They will take you to where the city hall is. You will interrupt them. They were going where they were going and they'll stop, change direction, and take you to the city hall. That's the kind of country we live in. And
wow.
so like I said, I grew up in Zimbabwe all my life. I went to high school here, and for university, I went to South Africa. One of the reasons why I went to South Africa was to get some exposure in another African country, and I was fortunate enough that I was able to get the opportunity. I studied economics and law in South Africa, and then I came back to work in Zimbabwe. During the time that I was growing up or coming of age, Zimbabwe experienced a lot of economic difficulties. One of
Okay,
the major things that happened was a land reform program that resulted in a lot of our industry breaking down. Agriculture is one of our biggest industries, Elisa. In Zim, we produce a lot of different crops, um, and like maize, tobacco, that
mm-hmm.
kind of thing. We have some horticulture as well. So when our agricultural industry went down, there was the land reform that happened was actually it was the result of a political crisis for the most part.
Okay,
And politics and economics are very linked. when we were hit with that political crisis, a lot of companies left, a lot of foreign companies left, which really led to the collapse of our economy. And from that time, it's Zimbabwe has had a lot of economic troubles, but they are not really problems. They're the problems that you see in a lot of African countries, like currency issues, like unemployment. So when I came back to Zim, I couldn't get a job for over a year,
Wow.
and it was really tough.
Yeah.
Eventually, I got a job in a law firm, and so I've practiced law for this is my 10th year since I got admitted as a lawyer, and that's what I've done
Wow.
for most of my career. Um, yeah. So in a nutshell, that's me trying to give you my life story in a few seconds. But if you want to go into detail about any of those, I'm happy to share.
Yeah, so of course I want to go to detail.
Mhm.
Tell me, like, I think you are right. Either here in Angola, it is the same. We have a lot of young people finishing university um, here in the country and the outside of the country. A lot of them, they are like unemployed, and it's very stressful when you know that you have the skills but there is no opportunity for you. I want to know more, like, how did you navigate for this 1 year looking for like jobs in your own country after come back from South Africa? Did you have that kind of thought that, oh, why I didn't stay there in South Africa instead of come home and try a new thing? Zola?
Hi, Lisa. What
Yes.
you're back? I lost you for a moment.
Oh, yes. I was asking, for example, how was for you the feeling of finishing your degree in South Africa and come back home and stay like for 1 year without a job? Because I think there is a lot of young people that they went through it, and it is not only in Zimbabwe, but maybe in all the continent. Either here in Angola, we have a lot of cases like this.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there was a lot of fear, and eh, I was very discouraged because, I spent 5 years in school studying for my degrees, and to come back and to have nothing, because you're told that, if you go to school, that's the main thing you should do. Just go to school, get your degree, get a job, and you've done well. And I felt like I had failed in some way. And I felt, I saw my friends in South Africa getting jobs and getting new flats, and renting new
Yeah.
places. And I was still sitting at home without, I mean, I couldn't even buy myself an ice cream. I was completely broke because I couldn't get a
Yeah.
job, even though I had worked as hard. So it felt very unfair that just because I'm from this country. Now I'm going through this, It was a really, really difficult thing. And, I even got to the place where I was literally looking for jobs as someone who works in the reception, which is a job that it doesn't require a degree. But I became so desperate, it was such a desperate feeling of I need to be doing something, because work is important, right? So I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy. It was a really difficult time, a terrible time. But I will say that during that time, I spent a lot of time writing. And because of the internet, I could share my writing. I created a blog and I kept myself busy. So even though I was very discouraged and, felt all kinds of feelings, I found ways to keep myself busy, and it was through writing. And I was quite successful in my writing, and it's one of the highlights of that time. So as much as it was a really difficult time, there were really cool things that happened as well.
Yeah.
Mhm,
Interesting. And
mhm,
you studied law and economy. Let us talk a little bit about finance. I
mhm,
would like to know, like, why is financial literacy crucial for adults in Africa today? Because I remember when we was in Mandela Washington Fellowship, you told a story in your speech about your grandma and the difficulty of learning about finance. And I think all these difficulty that Zim is passing through, it is all about like how to manage money, not only the governmental money, but the money from people. Like how a young person can like navigate through a country or a continent that is going to many issue in the financial space.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Okay. Yeah, it's a great question. Perhaps where I can begin, Eliza, is to say, we talk about how Zimbabwe has a literacy rate of over 90%, right? But what's the
Yes,
financial literacy rate, right? So
yes,
when we talk about literacy, we say someone can read and write, but how much do they understand money? And so when we talk about financial literacy, it's not even something that we talk about in school. I'm sure even with you financial literacy may be a term you heard about when you were an adult. Maybe even when we were doing the Mandela Washington program, that's when you heard people talking about financial literacy. But what it is that it's about your ability to understand and use skills to manage money, like you said, right? So budgeting, saving, investing, and managing debt. So it's financial literacy is about not only understanding what the word interest rate or inflation means, but it's about being able to effectively use your knowledge and understanding in your own life. So with your own
okay,
personal financial issues. So when your salary comes in, financial literacy is about you understanding, okay, if I take 10% of this and save it, I can either put it under my bed or I can put it in a savings account. So
hmm,
your financial literacy is about, do you actually understand the difference between those two things? Um, what is a savings account? What's the difference between a savings account and a current account? Right? So
yes,
that's what we're talking about when we're talking about financial literacy. And the entire reason why financial literacy is so important is the world is revolves around money. So
yes,
even when for us to do this call, we had to get data, right? To get onto this call. And that costs money. And as you're running this podcast, you are investing money into your
yeah,
podcast. And you're maybe for now you're not budgeting, but at some point you need to be thinking about your budget, right? And how much of your income you're putting into this, whether you're going to get investors in. So really financial literacy is a key part of navigating the world in any country. But for Africans especially, it's such an important thing, especially for young people and for people of all ages. You talked about the story I told about my grandmother. And with that story, what I was essentially illustrating was what can happen where people are deprived of financial education and how it can actually your life can turn out completely differently if you've got access to financial education.
this is true. Do you think that the culture in itself they help us make like different decisions in when we are talking about like money? For example, maybe my way of how I see money in Angola is different of the way that people they see money in Zimbabwe or in another part of the world.
Uh-huh.
Do you think
Uh-huh.
like our culture
Yeah,
like have an influence on it?
absolutely. I think culture is everything. So, I mean, in Africa, we have 55 countries, 54 countries.
Yeah.
And uh, each country, like we've already talked about how there's 16 official languages in Zimbabwe. So,
Yeah.
you know, there's not one culture in Zimbabwe. There are many different cultures in Zimbabwe, same as in Angola. And, you know, if we take into account all these countries and all these ethnic groups that we have in Africa, many different cultures. But I think there's some basic things that are quite similar across different cultures, across different cultures within Africa. For
Mm-hmm.
example, we talk about how in Africa, most of our cultures are collectivistic, right? In the sense that our culture is around community rather than the individual. So,
Yeah.
for example, in when you get your salary, Eliza, or let me talk about myself. When I get my salary, I don't think, oh, here's what I'm gonna buy with it. I'm gonna get this, and I'm gonna get, all the things that I want. I'm gonna get sneakers. I love sneakers. I'm gonna go out. I obviously take out for all the basic costs, and then I think, oh, my cousin needs school fees, and my younger sister needs, this. I need to help with this, and my grandmother needs this. And the whole idea being that, so, we're not individuals in this world. We are a community. And a lot of our decisions are influenced by that kind of thinking as well. So I think, broadly speaking, when I think about financial decisions, I'm thinking about how you spend or how you give or how you save. And it's really another really interesting thing I've picked up from just studying how people handle money in different African countries is we have different innovations. So remember how I told you about how in Great Zimbabwe they had this way of building that was completely innovative and different to the way it was done anywhere else in the world. In Africa, we have ways of saving and investing that are very different as well. So in Zim, growing up, my aunts and my older female relatives used to do what are called savings clubs. So what they would do, the way they used to work, was that say you have $10 and I have $10. We agree that, okay, every single month, the 10 of us in our savings club are going to put in $10 and pool it together. So if it's 10 of us in a club, at the end of every month, we have $100. And then we decide what to do with it. Maybe, Eliza, you have your business that you are running. In February, you get the $100 and you get to invest it in your business, right? And then maybe in March, I have some kind of family emergency. I get the $100 and I get to put it towards the family emergency. So every month, each of us puts $10, pools that money, and it multiplies the power of of our money just by putting it together. And those are some cool and innovative ways that we do things. And that's actually a cultural thing because we are collectivistic. It's a community thing. So you join that club with your neighbors. You can, in a particular community or in a church group, it's a community savings club. And that's just an example of how culture can influence financial decisions.
Do you know that this exists here in Angola too? And I think maybe it is an African
Amazing.
stuff. Yeah, we call it
Yes.
kishikila, is how we call it.
Tishikila.
Yes, we call
Ha.
kishikila. Yeah. And
Did you say
in,
Kishikila?
yes, I said kishikila.
Okay, thank you. I'm writing it
Yeah.
down.
Okay, it is how we call it. And in Ghana, I found out that they have the same system too, and they call
Um,
soto. In Ghana, they call soto.
uh,
Yes. In Kenya, I know they have the same, but I forget the name. And I think in Nigeria, you can find the same system too, but with other name. I don't know. Maybe it is like an African stuff. And as you
yeah.
said, the continent is a community.
Uh-huh.
It is
Uh-huh.
basically how we are. And I think it is the way that each country, different way, like different culture, kind of different language, but there is a lot of similarities in the way that we do stuff, like a lot.
I'm not even surprised, Eliza, that that is there in Angola because, yeah, exactly like you say. When I speak to different people about it in Zimbabwe, in Shona, it's called Chimbaza, and it's literally we were doing the same thing. But something I want to point out is sometimes when you see statistics about African countries and savings rates, a lot of what you hear is like, oh, the savings rate is so low, they don't save, which is just not true. People do save, but they save according to their own cultural practices. And the problem sometimes is that our traditional financial system doesn't recognize these things because they're imported from other countries. So when banks set up in Angola, when they come to Zimbabwe, they bring their own concepts of saving, but we already have our concept. And really, what I love the question about culture because it's really talking about the fact that we have our way of doing things and we should talk about our ways of doing things and exchange ideas about our ways of doing things, not what we've been taught by people from other cultures necessarily.
Yeah, I agree. And sometimes I think it as education, like I think instead of we still using, and the other countries they are already doing it, instead of we still
Uh-huh.
using the same education system, why we don't create like a education system that can really work for the continent,
Uh-huh.
something really made by Africa, and that it is around the community and the way that we save. Because if we, for example, if we take this way that people saving money in community and maybe transform it in a digital way of do or of
Uh-huh.
saving money, this can be like a kind of a digital bank, different of
Uh-huh.
the other bank, but it is something that can exist. It's like take the concept and the how people they do that, and they try to innovate. Try to innovate. I think maybe things they can be better. Maybe like people can really take the technology and use it, because it is kind of how I do the things. Maybe right now, instead of put the money in a jar or in my bed, I will put in a phone, like it is
Uh-huh.
digital, but it is the same. And I can, for example, control those that they need to pay this month or next month, and like something like this.
That is brilliant. I'm going to steal that idea. It's, it's brilliant, Lisa, and that's it. Because when we talk about innovation, really, we're not talking about coming up with something completely original that no one has ever seen. What we're talking about is combining different things in new ways. So
Yeah.
exactly what you're talking about, where you're saying take a practice that's already there, combine it with technology, digital technology, and there you've got innovation. I love it,
Hmm.
and that's exactly what we need to be doing right now in terms of revolutionizing the way people handle personal finances. I love that idea.
Thank you. And I think this can really be implemented in a country that it is more open in
Uh-huh.
like fintechs and all the stuff. For example, here in Angola, have a fintech is a headache.
Uh-huh.
It's really a lot of bureaucracy, unfortunately. And let me say, it's difficult in general way. It is
Uh-huh.
really difficult. Like someone like me, oh no, I have a good idea, I will open a fintech, like forget about it. It is very difficult. But I think this is something that can work in country that they are more open to accept new technology, and I think can really work, and the people they can be using. We talk, and in one of the curiosity that I saw was that Zimbabwe have a high inflation rate. I want to know, how it is for you guys that live in there with all this inflation, how people they organize their finance, how people they manage their daily base, like how you buy things, like how it's
Mhm.
work for you.
Right. Um, yeah, so I think one thing that's really interesting about Zimbabwe is that we have a dual currency system. So we've got our local currency, which is called a ZiG, Zimbabwe Gold. And then we've got the US dollar as well. So you can imagine if in Angola you had the Kwanza, right? And then you
Yes.
had the US dollar. When you walk, if imagine walking into a shop in Angola and the price is $1, but you can also pay in Kwanza if you want to. So that's the system we have, which is a
Okay.
really, if you are from outside the country, it's very difficult to understand because, we're one of few countries that actually has that dual currency system. So it also means that some people earn US dollars only, some people earn local currency only, and some people earn both. So for most of my career, I've earned both. So I would get a deposit into my account in local currency, and maybe I would get cash in US dollars. It was a combination of the two. And what employers are trying to do there is to balance out. Because you see, with the US dollar, uh, its value is relatively stable. So if you are earning 100 US dollars, and that's what's on your contract, you know that it's very stable. Whereas your local currency amount can change quite a lot. And Elisa, this is a very, like when you talk about inflation and that kind of thing in Zimbabwe, it's quite a complicated thing because in the past we had one of the highest inflation. I think it was 2008 when we hit it's called galloping inflation. And
Okay.
I actually want to tell you the number if I can find it. But it was 79 billion percent per month, and a year-over-year inflation rate of 89.76 billion%. This is what they say. This is what economists say. I mean, it just means that it was out of this world. So in 2008, when I was in high school, what would literally happen is that in the morning, if you walked into a shop, um, the price you could walk in and walk back an hour later, and the price has gone up. It was that crazy. I don't know if you've ever experienced such a thing, but it just inflation essentially is just talking about how prices go up. And when you have hyperinflation, it's literally you walk into a shop, the price that you see right now, if you walk out and walk in again, it will be different. And
Wow.
and
It
it
is
was
scary.
impossible. It's scary. Yeah, it's scary. But that was back then. Now we don't have that problem. So back then it was unmanageable, essentially. But now when you have a dual currency system, here's how people I'm going to try and answer your question in terms of how do people actually manage their money.
Yeah.
Um and and for someone, when you talk about trying to manage your money and to protect it against inflation and things like, so inflation and currency devaluation go together because, like I said, inflation is about price changes. So it's about today, if you have $10 and chocolates are $1 each, it means you can buy 10 chocolates, right? If you go
Right.
next year if you go next year with $10, you and you can only buy 8 chocolates, it means the price has gone up. So that's inflation. When you see the power, your purchasing power going up or down. That's about inflation. And so what you want to do is if you have $10, you want to make sure that the value of your $10 stays the same or is maintained. You want to protect that value, right?
Right.
There are different things you can do. You can buy stuff. So what some people will do is they'll literally, I know people who will buy things that maintain their value. They may buy the stuff in bulk and then over time they'll sell it off, right? Because they know that as prices go up, the price of that thing will go up and they'll be able to preserve the value. Does that make sense?
Yes, it makes.
Right? Yeah. Oh, and so if you've got a lot of money, you might decide, okay, I'm going to buy property because with real estate, the price of real estate doesn't change that much. It's relatively stable. So you'll decide, okay, I'm going to take my $10 and I'm going to buy some real estate. And then you also have people, remember I mentioned that it's a dual currency system. So you have people who will want to keep their money in US dollars. So they might use, exchange their local currency for US dollars, and they'll want to save in US dollars, and it will, preserve its value. And so those are some of the ways. But when we're talking about people who are investors now, there's a whole lot of things like diversifying portfolios, but I'm not a financial advisor. I'm just sharing information and from personal experience. But those are the range of things, and I just wanted to illustrate to you how complicated it can get with finances in an economy like this.
Well, I can see how difficult it is, and
Uh,
I really ask myself like, um, how people they really can navigate through it. Mainly for those youths that you want to organize your own life because you feel like, okay, now I'm adult and I need to start to uh, settle down my things. And in this all craziness, inflation and the currency devaluation, I think can be very difficult for someone feel that, okay, I'm start to get organizing myself. I
uh,
uh, like here in Angola, for example, we are living an economic crisis too, and
uh,
for those youngs like me that you want to organize your life, it is very difficult. The price of buying a house increased so much. Buying a new car is basically impossible. It's like it is difficult, and people they are really complaining a lot about. Okay, and we have here it is kind of a joke. Like my
uh,
time of get old, the country is broken, because if we start comparing how things they was back
uh,
then, and you see like your the same currency, and you do a small comparison, you see like, oh my god, in that time people they was buying
uh,
things so cheap, like so much cheap. And right now, yeah, right now everything's so expensive. It is very difficult, but it's as you said, it is necessary we start having financial literacy and understand better how we can take care of our money. Like it doesn't matter if your country is in good situation or if it is in a bad situation. We really need to start learning more about uh, literacy in finance.
yeah, that's right, Elisa. I completely agree, and that's where I would land the th- that part of our conversation on the fact that we we have what we call a macroeconomic situation. You can't control um, what your currency is doing. You can't control prices, but you have to focus on what you can control, right? And that's why I'm so
Mm-hmm.
passionate
Yeah.
about people getting access to financial education because there are some very basic things. For example, if I ask you, Eliza, and I say, when was the last time you negotiated your salary? right? For most people, they never even think of that because, you just feel
Yeah,
like you're in this job, whatever salary they tell you you should have, that's the salary that you agree to, right? And I think sometimes the
right.
problem is that we're not very conscious, or we're not really empowered to think about the things we can control, and things like your income. It's the biggest thing when you talk about trying to improve your financial situation. It all begins with income. When we talk about protecting your wealth, that's very advanced. At the very basic level, we should understand how income works, right? And we should be understanding
Yes,
how, if you're someone who has a job, it, not all of us have jobs, but for those who have jobs, or for those who are starting businesses, how do we manage our income? How do we budget? How do we save? How much do we give? And we need to begin to get educated on those topics. And like you said, we we as individuals, we need to be thinking about that. We need to get access to that type of information.
This is true. I had like one episode with Igobe from
Uh-huh.
Botswana, and she's doing an amazing work with kids' financial literacy. It is basically a community that they create, that they teach kids in schools in Botswana about entrepreneurship, environment, and the financial literacy. And for me, I was like, wow, this is amazing. This is like it is amazing because they're teaching the next generation of young
Uh-huh.
African how they can navigate well in their finance. And for example, when we was talking, she was
Uh-huh.
explaining to me that they have one event in Botswana, and basically in this event they invite um, kids for across the continent for a lot of African country, and they give to these kids an exercise because few of them they are like entrepreneurs. They are kids with they're doing amazing stuff. And
Uh-huh.
they did them like one exercise and look like listen what they come up to. Imagine that one of the kids he traveled from Nigeria to Botswana, and a kid he saw the difficulty, for example, about you exchange the currency. He was like, when we came here in Botswana, for me and my mom was so difficult because we need to take our Nigeria money, convert it to dollar, and the dollar to Botswana money.
Uh,
Only like this you will be able to change. And the idea that the kids come up was like, why we don't have currency, a unique African currency that I
uh-huh.
can be traveling for one country to another and be exchange. And I was like, for me, like, bro, this is like if a kid they can see
Amazing.
this
Uh,
kind of things that we already see, we an adult, like
uh-huh.
why we really don't think in change, why we really don't think in okay, maybe it's necessary have a unique currency, I don't know, for all the continent or by region or something like this. But we're like, wow, these kids they're high level, and I
Uh-huh.
want a little bit to explore your thoughts about this, about okay, maybe we could have a unique currency.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, so having one currency would completely change the landscape in Africa. It would be a game changer. One of the things that I do is in my consulting business, I help I help businesses to protect their intellectual property in different African countries. And to tell you, Eliza, what I have to go through to just make one payment outside of my country is like there are like 10 application forms that I have to fill in, so many documents that I have to
Wow.
submit just to make one payment. And throughout this, it's a trademark registration process. There are three payments that I have to make. So you can imagine that every time I think about it, it's just, I don't want to do it. And so, with all those barriers that are there, it makes it, you actually say to yourself, let's not bother. Let's focus on
Mhm.
what we're doing here, because there's so many barriers to doing business with other African countries. And I think what that the kid entrepreneur identified is 100% true. One currency would change things because we would be able to do business freely, right? But there are a few challenges with trying to implement that on a continent like Africa. When you look at the US, what the US is actually 51 different countries. Those states are actually different countries if you look at the size of them.
Yes, yes.
But they have a federal system where it's one government over all these states, and then they have state governments that govern the all the different regions, which are like
Mhm.
countries. So you could have a situation like a federal government in Africa. But the problem and the difference in Africa is that we've already had our own governments. And now the thing is the Angolan government going to give up its sovereignty
Hmm.
to, so
Yeah, yeah, I
because
get you.
because one currency, you hear me? Because one
Yeah,
currency implies one government, or like, how are you actually going to govern that currency? Are you going to have one Reserve Bank of Africa? And who gets to make decisions and make policy decisions? Because right now Angola has its own Reserve Bank, right?
yeah,
So
right.
now, are you saying that what's going to happen with
I
Angola's Reserve
I
Bank?
get you.
What's going to happen with
Hmm.
the laws that are in place already? What's going to happen with the debt that Angola has? And then, we start comparing and we say, but, Morocco is so much more advanced than, I mean, pick any country. I'm not going to pick a country, but, we start comparing and we start saying, no, but you guys are going to burden our country because, our currency is strong and your currency is weak. And if you're performing badly, that brings our currency down, right? So it's a complex thing. And to be honest, I don't think it's ever going to happen. I want it to happen, but I don't think it's going to happen in our lifetime, just because there are so many competing interests. Even though it makes complete sense, how do you actually practically do it?
This is true. I get you, and I never thought about this. Yeah, in this, I really never thought about this in this kind of perspective,
Mm,
because in my mind we're like, oh, we need to do it, but I didn't think about the cons. I was
mhm,
on, okay, this is good, but I never thought like how can be difficult for this
mhm,
happen in one
mhm,
continent like our.
mhm,
Interesting. Zola, we are in the last few minutes for our episode. I want to say a huge thank you for accepting to be here to talk about finance, to talk about you, to talk about the house living in Zimbabwe. And today I learned a lot, but like really, really a lot of things about Zimbabwe. Um, Normally at the end of each episode, I like to ask my guest to recommend someone that I can interview in the next episode. Then I will ask you that you can give me the name of the person, the country that this person come from, and why do you think this person can come here and be able to share a lot of insight about what they are doing across the continent. Oh, and by the way, the person need to be someone from Africa. I can give you a few
mhm.
minutes to think about who do you want to invite.
Okay. I actually already have the person that I think you should speak to. And I think you should
Perfect.
speak to Martha Nangolo, who is from Namibia. And
Okay.
the reason why is because she is, first of all, they're a country with, they're going to inaugurate their first woman president very soon this year. And that's very, very interesting. And I think she'll have a lot to share in terms of women in leadership. She also works very closely in terms of African development. She's got a lot of knowledge in that area, and she's also passionate about young people and young people changing the world. She's a very interesting personality who has worked in different industries. She's worked in the fashion industry as well. So I think you can have a very interesting conversation with her. And yeah, she's just a great, all around, she's a great person. And I think your listeners will really benefit from hearing from her. She also has a connection with Angola because Namibia neighbors Angola. And, you know,
Yes.
when one of the things is I really wish that we had more conversations amongst people in the region, like more regional conversations happening. And I think Martha is someone who would be such a great person to talk to about that as well.
Wow, thank you. Thank you so much for recommend Marsha. And Zola, we are in the last minute. Do you want to leave one advice for those that they are listening to us, for people from African general way and specifically for Zimbabwe?
Yeah, I think what I want to talk about, Eliza, is the example that you're setting with this podcast. I think one of the things that I'm really passionate about is Africans telling their own stories in their own words. And what you've done with this podcast is really amazing. And my advice to people is to follow your example, you know, to start conversations about things you're interested in, be curious about people, and ask people questions and share stories, share your thoughts, whether it's writing. Eliza does it through podcasts. But, you know, we've all got different ways. Some of us are musicians, others are poets, others are painters, and some are writers. But we need to be people who are telling our own stories. And I just love this platform you've created, Eliza, for us to share our stories. And that would be my encouragement to everyone. Share stories, be curious, talk to people who are different to you. And, you know, let's talk about Africa and let's not let other people tell our story for us.
Wow. Share your story. Amazing. Really, really amazing. Zola, thank you so much to be here with me. Thank you so much for taking your time and share about your story, about your what you like to do and your thoughts. For the people that they are listening to us at home, thank you so much for being here in Roadmap 54. Until the next episode. Bye bye, Zola.
Thank you so much, Alicia. It was a pleasure.
Bye.